already?
Heck yeah.
This is a fantastic group. However, it is kind of disconcerting when you consider there's about 16 spots available coming up for election, and we maybe have 30 people in the room at the max. So it does kind of, and I know some of them aren't even thinking about running for office. So it's an interesting time that we're facing in our community. Of course, we kind of go through that every 4 years. But we're excited to have each and every one of you out tonight. We thank you for taking time. Our goal is to try to keep this as brief as possible so we don't take up your whole evening with this. So let's move right along, and please let's stand for the prayer and then for the pledge. Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for the opportunity we have to gather together this evening. We do thank you for the city of Central that you have allowed us to be a part of, and for allowing it to be incorporated back in 2005. We ask that you would help us to continue to be wise stewards of the blessing that you have placed in our hands. Continue to give us the wisdom and the insight that we need as we move forward. We do pray for this election season that we're moving into. Encourage the right candidates to run for the proper positions, and let peace and unity still continue to thrive in our community during this season. And we praise you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. The pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated this evening. Just to let you know, my name is Ron Erickson. I am the President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development, and I also pastor a church here in Central, and I'm also a grandparent and a father, so we do have ways of trying to keep busy. We're excited to have this opportunity. This meeting came about as a result of a community leader prayer meeting that we do the first Tuesday of every month, and some folks got together afterwards and said, wouldn't it be a good idea if we just began to do something where we could educate folks to the process? And that's kind of what this meeting is about tonight, is more of an education process. We at the Chamber believe that it's important for our folks to be informed as to how our community government operates. We are actually going to be starting a leadership group through our economic development organization called CABA, and it's going to be called Central Leadership Central. So we're going to be excited about that. Look forward to seeing maybe some of you get involved with that. So it'll be awesome opportunity to learn how a lot of things operate throughout our community and our government. But then we may even look at doing this every 4 years. However, if we do it again in 4 years, I promise you it won't be 1 week before qualifying. So all you know, qualifying is coming up July the 20th. So just some information for you. Tonight's meeting presentation, everyone that is present tonight has volunteered their time to be here in a joint effort to offer some insights on how your local government works. This will be a brief overview. We will not take time tonight to dig down into the details. There may be future workshops on details if there is a need to do so. We will not entertain specific questions. We will entertain questions that are submitted ahead of time and approved by the moderator. You should have specific questions that you would like answered. Please send them to, and it's Dr. Tom, by the way, and school board people. Who's here from the school board? Raise your hand if you're from the school board. Ms. Brown, Ms. Foyle, Ms. Powers. Anybody else? So we're glad to have you guys with it. Oh, Roxanne up there, yeah, she's from the school board. And we have the mayor with us, of course, and Dave Fernell from the city council. Any other elected officials here? Who? What did I call him? Can we edit the tape, please?
It's been a long day.
All right, so Dave will forgive me.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, he's going to come during my Wednesday night prayer meeting now. He's going to be offended. All right, so moving along. So you able to contact these folks if you have other questions. And the main thing I want to do tonight, we're going to avoid anything that deals with political issues. In other words, why is this done this way? Why did they do this? Or who's responsible for this? And that kind of thing. Our goal tonight is to educate you on how the process operates so that you'll be able to go ahead and decide if you want to run for office or not. So there's a lot of similarities in the city government and the school board. The city government has council meetings, hearings on budget and administration issues, planning and zoning, city services. There are the elected officials, the mayor, the police chief, and the city council. The school board has committees, they have hearings, they have board meetings, and also our elected officials and the school board. So next, we're going to have, let me go through some of the differences. City government differences. City government works with occupational license, permits, public works department, which is our IBTS, that takes care of the work, the roads, the drainage, code enforcement, and they're funded by local sales tax, licenses, and grants. So they don't get property tax, just so that you know that. The only thing that the city gets is sales tax. Then the school board works on academics, arts, athletics, funded by three sources: local property and sales tax, the state, grants, state and federal, and capital projects. So how does the school board work? Miss Roxanne will take over for there and tell you how the school board operates.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you all came tonight. Appreciate it. I represent District 2 in the Central Community School System, and our school board members are all elected. We have a 4-year term cycle, and that cycle actually began in 1986. So every 4 years, we have an election of school board, and everybody has to run for that election. We also have to qualify every 4 years. Our term limits are 3 terms now, and that came into effect after I had had my first term. So after my first term, I had 3 terms that I could serve. So I have 1 more term that I can serve because of the term limits. Continuing education requirements are in place per year, and we have an ethics committee that makes sure that we do everything we're supposed to do ethically. There are reports that must be submitted annually, and we are responsible for submitting those personal and individual reports. There are 7 districts in the state and the city of Central, and each district is represented by 1 person. There is a monthly compensation of $600 to serve, $600 a month, and $700 for the president of our school board, who is elected by the members of the school board every year. Our tradition is that the term for the president will last 2 years, but we do have that election every year. The primary duties of a school board member are to make policy, hiring the superintendent, and serving as the entity responsible for the public budget of the school system. We also make sure that the superintendent follows the policies that we make in the system. We hear appeals of student expulsions. Now, a lot of people think that we have a lot to do with the personnel, but we do not. Specific personnel matters are not generally within the scope of the school board. That is handled by the superintendent. Our public school board meetings are held once a month, the second Monday of each month, unless a date has to be changed for one reason or another. We'll change the date, but give people plenty of opportunity to note that on their calendar. We follow the public meeting laws, and those laws you can find, it's a law RS 42:11-28. It's a very long, detailed law, but we follow that to the letter. We also follow Robert's Rules of Order, which are very specific, and the president is required, and the assistant president, the vice president, to know the Robert's Rules of Orders in order to make the meetings run smoothly. The agenda for each school board meeting is publicly announced 24 hours, 1 business day ahead of the meeting, so that the public is aware of the items to be voted on and reports that are to be made. The agenda is prepared by the president and the superintendent. The board takes action on items on the agenda by presenting the action. A motion is made and seconded, then discussion by the board, and then discussion by the public before the vote, and the item is passed or rejected by a majority of the vote of the board, those 7 members. Roll call votes are used occasionally, and in special votes, such as resolutions that are considered, and votes to go in and out of executive session. Reports only are just that. They are reports that are given, and there is no action that needs to be taken in that report. We're just letting everyone be aware of what had been discussed in committee. And how and when does the public participate? And this is always an action that is, we haven't really advertised that and educated people enough on how this happens. But after a motion has been made and seconded, the board discusses, When the president asks for discussion from the audience members have 3 minutes to state their thoughts on that item that has been brought up. Only that item, and nothing else can be brought up by that member during that particular discussion of that motion. Only that motion can be discussed. And the comments are limited to that item at the moment. The audience member has to state his or her name in the microphone for public record, address, and then delivers his statement and comments made before we can vote on that agenda item. So the public is always involved in any decision that is made. We hear what they have to say before we can vote. The person who is speaking or giving their comment is not to ask questions of the board or make requests of the board. It is only her comment for them to give their reasons why they support or do not support an item on the agenda. We have committees that have functioned very well on our school board. We have 4 working committees at this time. And each committee has a chairman that is appointed by the president. The president appoints one of those school board members to become the head of that committee. And then the committee is composed of at least three school board members serve on each committee. Each chairperson can choose 1 or 2 members from the community to serve on the committee with approval of the president. It's not required. It sometimes happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen. It just depends on the situation and the chairperson that has been asked to be chair of that committee. Committees have deliberative and recommending powers only. When we meet in committee, we do not vote on those items except to present them on the agenda to the upcoming school board meeting. The committee shall consider only those items that are referred to it by the president of the school board, the superintendent, or by formal school board action. Committee meetings are held monthly, the last week of the month, and currently the last Wednesday of the month at 5:15 p.m. All committees, if they're required to have a committee meeting, meet at that time. That is subject to change. In fact, we're talking about moving the Wednesday to a Thursday so that we don't interfere on church night, on Wednesday night. And we've had several people request that, and so we're looking into that to possibly moving it to Thursday. All committee meetings are advertised and open to the public. In fact, we encourage, as a school board, that is the best place to come and hash things out, because everything that is going to be presented at that school board meeting will have been hashed out in a committee meeting. And sometimes our committee meetings last 2, 3, they've been known to last really long. When we're talking about something that is important to some people, and they want to have their ideas presented. So, and we listen, and we come up with a consensus, and then we decide how that particular agenda item is going to be put on the school board agenda. Items that are recommended by committee to place on the school board agenda of the next meeting are voted on by the committee members. So that committee is made up of the 3 school board members and maybe some people from the public, from our community, and they're the ones who vote on whether or not that item will be put on the school board agenda. You may check the policy on agenda preparation and dissemination on the CCSS website. It is very, very detailed, but it's all in policy, how we do things with the committee, and you can find that on our policy on our website. Let's see. We do have occasional opportunities to have meetings and hearings on our budget. And that is open to the community, and so we open that up, and then we have public meetings on that budget, and then we vote before we can bring it to vote at the school board meeting, we discuss it at that hearing before the meeting. And that about sums everything up for me.
All right, thank you, Ms. Roxanne. And now to go over how the school board is funded. Some of those issues may be similar to the city, but then the mayor will also explain the other issues on how the city is funded. So Barbara Gunn, our Chief Financial Officer for the Central Community School System will explain how we're funded.
Good evening and welcome. The school system has various forms of funding. We have local funding, state funding, and state federal grants, and a new one for us is capital projects. Within the local funding, we have two sources. We have property taxes and millages, and we have sales taxes. Within the property taxes, we have constitutional, voter approved, these are both millages for general operations, and then we also have general obligation bonds, which are voter approved when we have construction. The funds raised from the specific construction general bonds are set aside to pay those notes, unlike the mortgage. We have sales taxes. We have 2% sales tax for our general operations, and we have a 0.5-cent sales tax that was voted on by the public for construction. That again is also set aside, that portion, to pay specifically that debt and note for construction. In our state funding consists of the minimum foundation program, that the funds come straight from the state, from Louisiana Department of Education. Including in the minimum foundation program is a very extensive formula, and there's many components. Things such as student count, our career tech ed student count, our special education student count, economically disadvantaged students. It includes the times for the governor just in state raises. They include those funds in the MFP funds. It also considers a portion of our local revenues. There's a formula that counts for the local funds that we raise and then adjusts the state funding based on that. And the state, to receive these funds, holds us accountable to the state guidelines, both financially and programmatic for the school. Spending guidelines that the state holds us to, they have an example is we have a 70-30 rule. 70% of our overall budget, general fund budget, has to be spent on instruction and curriculum. And a huge piece of that is our salaries and benefits for our teachers. The next thing we also have is grants. We get state grants and federal grants. The main state grant we get is LA4 for our pre-K students. That allows us to have a pre-K program within our schools. With the federal funding and grants, we have many various grants, but the largest ones that we have are IDA, which is for special education, Title funds for No Child Left Behind, Carl Perkins for career tech ed, and then there's many more, as you can imagine. And we've been getting ESSER funds as well in recent years. The newest funding source we have is for capital projects. Our state senator, Bodie White, has been able to get us some funds to help with our construction. And it's been interesting to learn that and deal with those funds, but we're very thankful that we have those funds to help build the construction that's currently going on now. And that would finish up on my part. Sure. So bond issue for general obligation bonds, when we have actually general obligation bonds and sales tax bonds. They put kind of, what's the term, maybe, well, y'all throwing me off. The board goes forth after the resolution, when the voters approve us to issue bonds, then we hire finance people and the bond attorneys, and they go out to bid with, and this is just a very brief overview, I don't get in details, we hire professionals to do this, but they buy or put out to bid for people to buy bonds from us to be able to fund our projects. And then we pay 2 notes per year, which consist of interest and principal on each of those bond issues.
So that's kind of like how a lot of the construction takes place as well, wasn't it? Like the original middle school and intermediate school works with bonding issues. And that's where, we don't need to get in the weeds of that time, but that's where you get the whole issue of rolling forward and not, to roll forward or to not roll forward, that is the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think one of the things interesting when we're talking about funding issues for the public, understand, once a bond issue, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, once a bond issue, since bonding is something the city's not into right now, but once that bond is approved, you have the opportunity to roll it forward at the set rate every single year. I mean, is it every year or is it every 2 years? Four?
Reassessment every 4 years.
Every 4 years. But if you don't roll it forward, then you miss that opportunity, and once that bond starts being decreased, you can never bring it back again. So you lose the opportunity for those dollars to keep moving forward. So that's where the debate comes in as to whether or not you need to keep moving that thing forward. And for instance, recently our school board chose to not roll forward, or was it roll forward or not roll forward? Yeah, go ahead. Help me out here before I get into
It's,
it.
the bond's different from millage.
Yeah, I just want to say the difference in that, yes, that case was on our basic, operating millage. But in 2009, whenever the voters approved the 23.65 mil bond to build the intermediate school and the middle school, that was passed in 2009, and that also included the half-cent sales tax. So in 2020, we went back to the voters to renew that one. That was different than the roll forward. These are like two different conversations. But in that case, in 2020, in August of 2020, we went back to the voters and asked to renew that one, which does push it out another 20 years. Because what would happen is, when you bought those in 2009, it would go out until 2029, typically a 20-year deal on those bonds. So we could have let the millage just start rolling back in 2020, and it would slowly roll back until it hits zero at 2029 and everything's paid off. Because as property values go up, you're bringing in more money to pay the bonds, so it starts the sinking fund and all these things. But in 2020, what we had the option to do was either the millage would start rolling back, that 23.65 mils, or we could renew it, which would push it out 20 years, but it gave us, we thought it was going to give us about $23 million for the high school renovation, but it actually came in about $25 million because at that time the rates were so good that we got a premium on it. But anyway, the point on that is that did push it out 20 years, but what it allowed us to do was basically make our high school brand new. And you'll see that over the next 6 months as they finish that up. If we had let that go down, and let's say in 2029 we were going to go build a brand new high school, likely to go build a brand new high school with stadium and all the athletics, they tell us it might be $70 or $80 million. So while that would have been the ideal to say, okay, let's just build a new high school when we can, it sort of came down to, first of all, I didn't think we could wait another 10 years on the high school. It was in such bad shape on the inside, and now it's basically turned into a brand new school, and it'll go for the next 50 years for us. But anyway, my point, I just want to clarify that voter-approved millage, the 23.65 mils from 2009, was renewed in 2020. And down the road, it will come up again, and the board will have to decide, do we just let it play out over the 20 years, or do you renew it and use that money? I mean, if you have something to use it for. So that's just a decision down the road that'll have to be made.
Thank you, Dr. Fallon.
Say one thing too about the bond issues. Your current school board has done a really good job in maintaining the fiscal policies and maintaining a fund balance, and that has effect saving the taxpayer dollars on the percentage of what the bond issues have gone out for. We've had a very low percentage, under 3% on recent bond issues. And because we also have good fiscal policies of maintaining the fund balance, we go to Standard & Poor's and get ratings for both sales tax and general obligation bonds, and we have excellent ratings of AA- and AA+.
We're as high as any school system in the state. There's no school system that has a higher rating.
Because they're so fiscally responsible, it saves the citizens money.
So the reason I wanted to get into that is just so that people who are interested in running for school board understand it's not just dealing with what you're going to educate the kids on. There's a lot of financing and a whole lot of other issues that come into play that you have to be aware of, and you have to know how the system works because it gets complicated really, really fast. Even with that explanation, I'm like, okay, sure, I understand that. So far less complicated, I think, at times, but sometimes not so uncomplicated, is the city government. So we're going to let Mayor David Barrow go ahead and explain that for us.
All right, thank you and good evening, everybody. You're going to see that there are some similarities in governments between the city and the school board as to how things run. So Roxanne did a very good job of explaining some of those items, so I'll try not to be too repetitive. But the City of Central, as you know, was formed in 2005, and it was formed under the Lawson Act. That's one of the most popular form of government in the state of Louisiana. The majority of your cities are set up under the Lawson Act, which is a state guideline. You can look it up. It's a very thick book, about 2 inches thick, that tells you everything about how to run the city. You basically have the elected positions are the mayor, your city council, and your police chief. And similar to the school board, we are maxed out after 3 terms. There are 7 city council members, 5 districts, and 2 of them are at large. This term, the council members that are in office right now, this is the first time for districts. So actually the last election was the first time that districts came into play. And similar to the school board, the elections that we're having this fall in November, will have slight adjustments in some of the districts. You're required to do that every 10 years with the census. You have to do redistricting. The state legislature does it, school board does it, everybody does it. You have to make sure that your districts have as close to equal population as you can get, and those have to also be approved by the federal government. So those are your elected officials. Under the Lawson